I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but sometimes that's just not true. Sometimes we love it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but deny it all we want. It's a temptation for all of us. See, I just fell for it. All of us can fall prey to the joy of being the first to tell others about something bad that happened. Some, however, truly rejoice in any opportunity to deliver bad news, and we all know folk like that. Hopefully, it's not the person staring at us in the mirror. Now, that doesn't mean we should avoid delivering bad news when it's our obligation to do so. Just don't look like we're enjoying it. In fact, don't enjoy it. And don't be like Jonah, who was terribly disappointed when his bad news didn't come to pass. We've been looking at the Old Testament book of Jonah, which is just 4 short chapters. Jonah was sent to preach to Israel's enemy, Nineveh. Instead of going as commanded, he skipped town. He hated to be the bearer of bad news. But when given a second chance, he went and declared the bad news. Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Jonah 3 verse 4. But when Nineveh repented and God relented, we learned exactly why Jonah didn't want to tell them the bad news. He wanted them to be destroyed and knew God was sending him on a mission of mercy. Today's Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible and An American Missionary reaches back to Plain Talk Magazine, June 1978, for an interesting take on Jonah and the delivery of bad news. Stuff About Things by Robert F. Turner. Jonah sought vainly to flee from the presence of the Lord, apparently to avoid his assigned obligation to preach to the wicked people of Nineveh. When he finally began his work, he warned, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." Jonah 3 verse 4. He was a prophet of doom, and must have been very convincing, for they believed God, and they proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. There is a valid place for warnings, severe and to the point. But Jonah seemed more concerned about his status as a prophet of doom than he did about the welfare of those he warned. When God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, he repented of the evil which he said he would do unto them, and he did it not. Jonah 3 verse 5 and 10. And this displeased Jonah. Chapter 4 verses 1 and following. He seemed to have lost sight of the purpose in warnings, to save rather than to revel in human misery, to pull from the fire rather than to warm his hands with the heat. We have bigger and better tornadoes in Texas, albeit some otherwise brave Texans cringe at the thought. One muscled hulk of a man, with a beard so thick his wife has to kiss him through a straw, cries like a baby when it thunders. Well, that's the way they tell it on him. And one good story leads to another. They say he built himself a concrete and steel cellar and practically lived in it. Every time a little cloud blew in, he would run to his underground shelter, sit in the dark, fearfully contemplating the supposed destruction above, then finally emerge to find all safe and sound, refreshed by the lovely rain shower. Until that day when he pushed back his cellar door and stepped out into a changed world. His house was nowhere to be seen. His barns and sheds were but scattered wreckage. Trees were splintered and pulled from the ground. His cattle were all dead. He looked long and hard. He sighed heavily, and then he said, "Now that's more like it." Lord, if we must hear the crackle of hell's fire in order to see and correct our waywardness and escape its heat, so be it. But deliver us from the doomsday prophets who use our fears to sell their wares. Help us to cast out fear and anchor our soul in the haven of rest. Thank you, Robert, for that reminder. I especially appreciate the line to pull from the fire rather than to warm his hands with the heat. Are we upset like Jonah when God doesn't destroy the wicked when we want him to? Do we whine and cry about this sinful world and ask God to do something, instead of getting busy doing something like warning the sinful world about the consequences of sin? Do we want to pull them from the fire or use it to warm our hands? Thank you for watching this Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible and An American Missionary. Until next time, this is James McClenny hoping you have a great day.